I think we're going to move away from fanboyism and talk about something that's more closely related to like what you study, and that's race in games.
Yes.
Okay, so what's interesting is that one of my most memorable experiences was Pokemon Yellow version on the Game Boy Color, right?
Yeah.
You got that real sense of place, identity, you know, leaving your town for the first time, leaving your single mother at home to go pursue your dreams of becoming a Pokemon, whatever, right?
Pokemon champion.
Yeah. But, you know, you were always just kind of this static character. But in the new one, they're starting to introduce, you know, different skin colors, and you can customize your character. So, I mean, why did it take so long for this to happen? It's 2013, you know.
Okay. That's an excellent question, and I have hopefully a very good answer for that.
Yeah.
Well, the simple reason that we have change in diversity, or we haven't seen much of it, is basically, in the beginning, who were the game developers? And a lot of times it was controlled by, you know, it was males, you know, white males who were going out and getting these jobs and basically developing the games. But it's interesting because you did also see a lot of Japanese main characters or Asian main characters, and part of that was because some of those companies' developments are also in Japan. I think that's where, I'm pretty sure it's Nintendo's headquarters and something and all those. So we saw two sort of differences that, you know, one thing we wouldn't expect is like, okay, most of the times it's the white males, and we do see a female, it's the very attractive one, the very...
Sure.
You know, the I don't know, the bosomly one, with the unrealistic expectations of what a woman should look like, and part of that's because that's who was developing those games was sort of the males, the white males, but then, like I said, one interesting aspect was that one sort of subcategory or one sort of minority that was still included with this was sort of Asian Americans that were Asians in general because those were who were developing the game. So to look at the early days of who was, you know, basically why we were seeing those sort of trajectories and same sort of characters was because that's who's developing those games at the time. Now we see differences in who's developing the games. There's more diversity in gaming, from, you know, different races to different genders, different, you know, there's huge game development companies out that are just women making games for other women that are more geared towards that. People are understanding that, you know, not everybody likes a first-person shooter game, that character development is important, and because of that, we like diversity. Research shows that diversity in gaming, having characters of different races and genders and ages, actually results in positive attitudes towards the brand and the game itself.
Right.
Now, there are negative side effects, but part of it is that it's more of a joying experience. There's something that we call cultural voyeurism, whereby the numeric majority in a population, so the majority of whether it be gender, age, or race, actually views and enjoys representations of minority characters in the media. And so I think this concept has caught on. We see it in advertising, we're starting to see it in gaming, where people enjoy playing of different characters of different ethnic backgrounds and races. And we saw, like, primarily, even though it's not the best, I guess, representation, is the Grand Theft Auto series, where we saw in the very first one, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, of playing as a you know, black character, a black protagonist. Even though it was very stereotypical in the way it was portrayed, it was one of the first ones to include a large majority of African-American characters within a video game. We saw it later on with their, I don't know if it was Liberty City or the one where you played as the Russian immigrant. And so we started to see more expansion in terms of different characters and ethnicities being presented. There's still sort of a lack of, I think, Hispanic and Latino representation, but we're starting to see that change. And so I think part of the reason it changed was we have more diversity within the game development companies, people making the games, developing them for different types of demographics. But then also part of it is that people enjoy playing different characters, different ethnicities. There's even in sort of, like, for instance, in World of Warcraft, there is one of the motivations. So there's a guy by the name of Nick Yee, I think he's out of Stanford, who studies video game motivations and why people play online games. And there's things from achievement to competition to there's, you know, socialization. But one of the motivations that came out was basically gender swapping. So people specifically play as characters that are opposite from their gender for various reasons. But gender swapping was this unique motivation that came out of it, is that people like to play as different gender characters, and part of it is because of status, or they might get attention from other characters based on that gender, even though they, you know, the player isn't a woman. You know, they might get certain things that they just might like playing as a woman, and so we see differences. You know, this diversity coming through in the characters that are represented in gaming, and it's really interesting, really unique, and it's really nice to see sort of that perspective coming through of getting more diversity within gaming in terms of characters that are represented.
I mean, would you go so far as to say that this cultural voyeurism is like this generation's blackface, or is that too harsh?
I think that's a little bit harsh. I think it's nice that we see diversity, and these majority members want to see more diversity in it, and it's nice because it gives, we see, like in television, you want to see characters on television that they're wide range, so that it's not just the African American criminal or policeman. It's the African American doctor, the African American lawyer, the African American judge, the African American therapist. So we see a wide range of characters, and I think that's coming out in the video game context. Now, there is a point, like you were saying, there is a negative side to it. So there are stereotyping, which I study. Take once again the San Andreas, which was very stereotypical of African Americans. It was it was the game. I don't want to say it was modeled off of it, but we see a lot of like Boys in the Hood kind of themes, things like that. Growing up in a gang, trying to get out of the gang, being brought back into the gang, and sort of stereotypical of African Americans, even though that's not. Not every African American grows up in a gang. Right. It listens to rap music and all those things. So it was very stereotypical. Even though it included more African American in terms of representations, it was always stereotypical of that. And so I think part of it is, and I don't think the game developers were like, hey, let's make a really racist, stereotypical video game. Let's do that and see what we can come up with. Right. A lot of times when they do this, they're like, what's the most entertaining, what's going to be something people are going to want to play, really interesting, and what's representative of sort of the gang life and things like that. And so I don't think they necessarily set out for it to be that way. It just turned out to be that way. And so I think going forward, we need to understand that, much like we see on television, these representations need to be diverse in terms of occupations and roles, bad guys, good guys, scientists, shooter, sniper, whatever that may be, that are portrayed within the video games. And so I think it's a good starting point, but we need to move forward beyond those stereotypes to more basically diverse representations of occupation, like I said, and role they take within the game.
One question I really wanted to ask was, in the new Animal Crossing game, this is probably including the Japanese one, the fourth one in the series. Yeah. And that game is all about customization, creating a world that is you. Yeah. You still can't choose your skin color, although your skin does tan if you wait out long enough, right? Yeah. So I've heard stories on the internet of people with darker skin literally just staying outside all the time so they could have their character look more like them. But of course, after a couple of hours, the skin starts to fade. Why didn't Nintendo just implement, skin color choice in Animal Crossing?
That's an interesting question. One I don't particularly know sort of the answer to. That I'm not sure if they set out sort of have the different races and things like that. I know that with the Nintendo Mii's, you can change the skin color to certain aspects, and so it's you can do that. I think maybe within the context of the game, they didn't think it was important. Customization, as you refer to it, is very important to gaming in general. I mean, it's something that the gamers are starting to understand and developers are starting to understand. Is it creates a more impactful experience. If you can identify with your character, that can increase levels of positive associations with the game. So you enjoy it more if you identify with your characters and somebody you can't identify with. And so the ability to customize how you look and feel and things like that is very important to the overall gaming experience. Now, maybe Nintendo, I'm not sure, didn't think it was important to Animal Crossing in that regards of saying this is something we need to customize. I mean, if you look at like the World of Warcraft, even though there's no traditional races in terms of real world, there are races in terms of like elves and orcs and the dead people, I forget what they're called. But so there's in those terms there is customizability in that regards, but they're not races in terms of the traditional sense that we think of like ethnicity in the real world as compared to the World of Warcraft.
Do you think the Mass Effect games have been very popular? Because again, at the onset you can customize your character, and that character is not carried through all three games, from Mass Effect 1 to the end of Mass Effect 3. And you have all these choices. I mean, do you think that's what has contributed to the success of that franchise?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Mass Effect, it's been popular in the fact that you can customize it, and I think one of the things that gamers are starting to realize, or game developers are starting to realize, is that if you can customize the game so much so that the way it's played actually can change the outcomes, that's something really unique to the gamers themselves. Of like, they like the interactivity. That's why people seek out games, because you can interact with that environment. It's not passive like it is with television. You can interact with your character and the environment, and the more so that that interactivity is brought forth, the more it is that gamers enjoy playing that game. And so with the interaction of customizability, as well as taking that character and having different outcomes based on your actions result from gameplay, is something that's very impactful and something that can really create positive reviews of the game, increase sales. People really like playing